Hello. Hi, everyone. Um, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you guys for being here. My name is Terry, and I am going to be talking to you today about soft skills for highly effective designers. And I am a lead product designer at Cognizant Softvision. This is my first time doing a public presentation, as well as my first time speaking at Programmers Week. So I'm really excited, and I hope I don't mess this up. And I'm sure it'll be fine, everything will be good, but I just wanted to get that out there in case you guys think this is gonna be super fancy, which is not. Okay, so how do I want this to go? I think I'll probably go through the talk, and then at the end I will answer the questions that you guys have, and then we can kind of go from there. Right. Okay. So why are we talking about soft skills in a tech conference? That's a really good question. So lately I was sort of thinking about this, and it's been on my mind a bit because I've kind of changed my role a little bit. And I've been more into a kind of lead role where it requires more time dealing with people, dealing with collaborating with bigger teams. And this kind of subject started to kind of percolate in my mind for a while. And I wanted to share those thoughts with you guys and kind of let you guys kind of in on what I've kind of perceived as soft skills that have been helpful for me. And this is definitely not an original subject. There's lots of articles out there around soft skills and why it's important to UX. And I think they're all great, and you can kind of pick and choose which soft skills work for you. But these are the ones that I think are important to you as a designer. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and get into it. So why do soft skills matter? For us as designers, I think if you think about it right now, the state of what design is there's a lot of designers out there and there's a lot of competition. So when we think about trying to differentiate ourselves, there's only so much levels of UI and UX that you can kind of reach from a hard skill perspective, but how do you add that like cherry on top? And I think a lot of it has to do with actually like the soft skills that you bring into your the way you work and how you work with people. And that helps to kind of build your differentiation. And I know it can be a bit challenging, especially to kind of show soft skills, because it's something that's you kind of experience when you're working with someone. But if you pay attention to the details, then it'll help in like differentiating you. The other piece is I feel like soft skills is often kind of overlooked by technical proficiency. And by all means, if you're a designer and you don't know how to use a tool like Figma or Sketch, then yeah, that's a barrier that you're going to need to pass. But I think if you pay attention to soft skills and the impact of soft skills on projects and collaboration, you'll actually see that, or projects and kind of products, is that you'll actually see that the reason why a lot of these products or projects fail is actually because there is a lack of team communication, or there's no defined problem at the beginning, or the team isn't focused. So if you pay attention to those things, or you look at why something doesn't work, a lot of it actually comes down to how your team works and the soft skills that you've applied. And the other piece is, I think a lot of it has to do, like if you want to use your soft skills to grow as a designer, that's one of the things that allows you to kind of reach a point where you kind of go from intermediate or junior into more of a senior role, because that's really where a lot of your soft skills come into play. It's being able to communicate well, it's being able to share and present to people, and also just like working well with others, which you generally have to do anyway. But I think if you want to up your game, a lot of it actually has to do with polishing your soft skills. All right, and then the next piece. So I just want to set a baseline here of what I'm talking about throughout this talk. And no, it's a bit kind of like dummy, but I don't want to start with any sort of assumption. So what am I talking about when I talk about soft skills? This is what I'm referring to is the personal habits and traits that shape how you work on your own and with others. And that could be, for example, organization. As a designer, I'm organized so that I can be more efficient in my workflow. So I apply that. And then what are hard skills? Hard skills are technical knowledge or training that you receive either in school or in career. And that's being able to potentially use the Adobe Creative Suite. So as a designer, I use XD to design my products. And then what does it mean to be effective? Well, being effective means that you're producing a desired result. So if your goal is to launch a POC in a month, then being effective means you actually launch it in a month-ish. We can go from there, but that's kind of what I'm talking about. So this talk is going to be about how we use soft skills to produce our desired intended results, setting the baseline. And then how I've structured this talk is I wanted to take a look at the design activities that we do throughout our process. So I've broken it up into 4 different kind of categories. Discovery, which requires running workshops, problem framing, working with clients, presenting, taking feedback, building relationships, designing, which is basically translating requirements into designs, sharing designs, managing your designs. And then the last piece is team collaboration. So that's working with devs, working with PMs, working with other designers. And each of the soft skills will kind of break down into these categories. And I wanted to be able for people to take this slide deck away if they wanted to and explore and read later on like how they can improve on those different sections. So it's a bit wordy, but that's kind of the purpose of this. So I'll jump into it. The first skill of being an effective designer is that you are adaptable and flexible. And I know this is sort of like an obvious one, but I think it's really important because if you're not adaptable or if you're not flexible, then you'll be a very unhappy person and you'll be pushing back a lot and it'll just stress you out. So allow yourself to be adaptable because when it comes to product design, you never begin and end with the same thing. So what does that mean? Adaptability is, let's say, for example, you've been designing with the assumption of A, and then client comes back and now new info, we have new info, and now we need to consider B and C. So adaptability means that things change and you react accordingly. Flexibility means that, you prefer using Figma, but the client's general environment is Adobe. So flexibility means things are set a certain way that's different from how you work. So you just need to change and accommodate. And those are things that won't impact the results, but you can kind of adjust accordingly. And then if we take a look at adaptability within our design process, discovery, a lot of that is really when it comes down to workshops. So I hope, like, we all know that workshops kind of don't ever run the way you think it's going to go. So to be flexible means that you need to be able to have A, B, and C plan up your sleeve. If something can go wrong, it will. And that's really where adaptability comes into play. And then when it comes to working with clients, people change their mind all the time. Requirements grow, budgets move. The nature of this is that you really need to come in with the ability to adapt to those changes and be able to provide an attitude that is more solution oriented. And I'm saying attitude because solution oriented means like you're not jumping to the conclusion of blaming or reacting in a way, but you're actually like, okay, well, this is how things are going. This is what the new requirements are. How can we make this happen? How can we make this work? And then from designing, there are a million ways to decorate a Christmas tree. I didn't want to use the cat analogy because I don't want to kill any cats. But essentially, there's a lot of ways to work, and there's a lot of ways to build a product. One of the ways, the real focus is to focus on the outcome versus how you do it. And really designing products should really be about being fast and iterating. So that's where flexibility comes to play. And when it comes to team collaboration, being flexible kind of means checking your ego a bit at the door, knowing when to kind of stick to your guns and when sometimes it's just best to kind of let the dev team do what they need to do so you don't so you can kind of get another win somewhere else. You know what I mean? So it's straddling that line and making sure that you don't always like push your agenda. So the purpose of adaptability is to focus on outcomes versus process. And as much as I am one to focus on process, I love process, process is the best. If you know your process well, you know when to move it and change it according to, so that you can reach your outcome. Because that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to reach our goals. So adaptability focuses on that and allows you to kind of adjust and maneuver as you move. The next. So I know I told you to be solution oriented earlier, but when it comes to UX, it actually means you need to be more problem oriented. And solution oriented, I was kind of more in the attitude of how you approach change, and problem oriented means more along the lines of what it is you're focusing on. So for example, client needs to add feature X to a product and it's super high priority. Let's get it done. Old you would have been like, ugh, client's always adding things last minute without consulting us. We're never going to finish this project. New you is like, well, why is this feature important to you? Are there new requirements that we're not aware of? How is this going to impact the product? Is there are other questions behind just the things that people give to you? So the heart of being problem oriented is understanding the core problem that you're trying to solve so you can actually solve it appropriately. And what does that mean in terms of discovery? Well, the whole discovery phase is focused around defining the problem, understanding the problem. That's why we run workshops. That's why we do interviews. That's why we run design sprints. If we can't define the problem, we can't solve it. And then when it comes to working with clients, getting to the heart of a client's request is the key. So when a client comes back with something and says, I want this, you really need to step back, don't let your emotions in, but just inquire. Ask about where it's coming from, why it's important, and like, how can we adjust or maneuver to make this happen, or how can we flex to, what can we remove to kind of adjust it. And then from designing, this is really where we ask questions, we probe, we listen, we evaluate, we allow ourselves to really understand things before we jump to a solution. And then when it comes to team collaboration, it's very similar as working with clients. You're trying to understand where people are coming from, trying to understand the core issue of what is driving that problem. And then the last is, if you don't understand the problem, you'll never achieve the right solution. That's it. And the next one, you're organized. I love organization. This is the best one. So things you should keep organized: your design files, meetings, presentations, feature documents, workshops, notes, to-dos. These are all things you should keep organized. And how do you do them? You label things properly. And believe me, I'm not perfect. I definitely need to work on that. And for meetings, you set an agenda. For presentations, you pay attention to the flow of your presentation, the story you're trying to tell. For feature documents, use spreadsheets. I love spreadsheets. They're my best friend. And for workshops, you plan, you prep, you practice. And then you have plan A, B, and C in your back pocket. And for to-dos, however you need to, just take note of them and organize them however you want. So when it comes to organization in the design process, in the discovery, I think organization, really the key thing to take away in workshops is that if you are organized, you come off as capable, you come off as confident, and your participants can focus on participating versus actually texting each other about how much of a waste of time this is. So be prepared. And then when it comes to working with clients, being organized is about being professional. So what does that mean? It means attending your meetings on time, taking ownership of your work, knowing that no one's just going to spoon feed you things, and that you know what to do next. And then the next piece is preparing for your presentations with your clients. So making sure the flow makes sense, making sure your links work, tools function, and that you've turned off all your apps so you can't get inappropriate messages during your presentation, which has definitely never happened ever. So The other piece is designing, which is 100% organizing your files. So it's putting yourself in the mindset that somebody somewhere is going to snoop in there and need to work on it. So keep your shit tight and label your layers properly. And do as I say and not as I do. So, and then being on a team collaboration and organization, it's really the kind of similar thing where there's a lot of moving parts, and what you want to do is you want to make sure that everything you do is organized. Your handoff notes are organized, you meet your deadlines, and it just shows that you're not working alone, and that you're cognizant of your colleagues and that you respect them. So by actually trying to make their lives a little bit easier. So organization makes you look professional, work efficiently, and shows consideration towards your colleagues. The next, you are collaborative. So this is an obvious one, but it's an important one. In a perfect world, I would live as a hermit and work alone forever. But unfortunately, if you want to build a product, you need to work with people, and it's usually a pretty big team. So that means collaborating with the dev team, with the clients, with project managers, with other designers. So you're constantly needing to manage everybody's intentions. And that's kind of where it comes in, is collaboration is really taking a look at everybody's intentions and finding that middle ground, which is the goal, and making sure that you don't put your goals above others. And I don't kind of dive deep into this one because I think it's something that just kind of pans across everything. But collaboration is staying focused on the outcome while supporting your team and making sure their voices are being heard. So don't put your ego in there. Know to ask questions, understand where they're coming from, and then, you know, be considerate and be organized. So these types of things all help in collaboration. The next piece, you are patient. So patience with your users, patience with your team members, patience with clients. The concept of design hasn't been something that has been fully grasped until much like recently. So when you work with clients or when you work with people who are not in the industry, it's important that we don't go in with assumptions that they know what we're talking about. And when I talk about assumptions, these are some of the assumptions that I think designers often come into projects with, which is what our role is on the team, what the client's role is on the team, or what another person's role is, what our design process is, what a prototype is, how to give proper design feedback, and it goes on. So when we come in with these types of assumptions, we don't give our clients and our team members the benefit of the doubt. And if we come in with the patience to be able to educate people on these types of things, then the project starts with a level ground. So when we talk about patience in the discovery, this is a great one because you're working with civilians, you're working with execs, you're working with clients, and a lot of what you're doing is very unfamiliar territory for people. And it's important, you know, that people are going to ask questions, they're going to get confused, and it's your job to kind of explain it. So you have to be patient and like allow people to kind of take time. And then when it's working with clients, it's what I said earlier, it's taking the time to educate people on what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. And the likelihood is you'll probably have to repeat yourself a lot, and it'll get frustrating and you'll feel like it's just you against the world. But the key is to be patient and to be diligent and to, you know, be understanding. And then when it comes to designing, this is kind of similar where, you know, if you take the time to explain your work and answer the questions, it allows everyone to kind of be on the same page and make decisions on the same level ground. And that's helpful. And then with team collaboration, it's really easy to jump to conclusions when you're working with your team over a long period of time. So the same level of patience that you afford your users and your clients should still be applied to your team members. And that just helps to build a good kind of cohesive team and trust. So in the wise words of Martin Lawrence from Bad Boys, just, you know, if things get frustrating, just woosah it and, you know, move on. So you are empathetic. And this one's an important one because we're user experience designers. It's literally the heart of what we do, which is to put ourselves in people's shoes. And empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and mirror and share a person's expressions and motivations. There was a really great article from the Norman Nielsen group that kind of breaks down the various levels of empathy, or the spectrum of empathy. And I think sometimes we kind of confuse, they talk about how sometimes we confuse sympathy with empathy, but empathy is really being able to kind of feel what others are feeling. And then for empathy within the discovery process, there are kind of two ways to think about it. There's empathy for the people you're designing for. So that's your users. You want to understand their problem and you want to be able to solution it properly. And the other piece of empathy is for your participants, who may be very confused at what is going on and not quite understand the process. So that's where you need to provide your guidance, and you need to be reassuring. So it's being conscious of that. And then this one, working with clients, the empathy for clients, I think this is one that often gets overlooked. So it's being able to put yourself in the perspective of the client and allow yourself to kind of get to the heart of why it's important to them, because they've hired you for a reason, and it's because they can't do what you do. So before we jump to the act of just like blaming clients, I think it's important to kind of provide empathy for them as well. And then the other piece is, how do we practice empathy in our designs? Well, we do user research, we do user testing, we ask open questions, we get diverse perspectives. And then we also try to focus on creating accessible products. There's a lot of ways to add empathy to your design process. And I think that the more we do add it, the better our products will be. And then when it comes to team collaboration, well, empathy is really just being conscious of your team members and asking yourself questions like, is my design going to give developers a major headache and take 2 extra weeks to produce? Probably, but you're going to do it anyway. Or can my design teammate pick up where I left off? Or is my file organized? So these are things that you just kind of empathize. Like, if somebody takes this, are they going to be able to understand what you're talking about? So empathy allows us to design with intent, introduce focus and clarity, advocate on behalf of users, and challenge our assumptions. Next, you are focused. So this one's a good one. On any given day, a designer could be doing any of these activities. I could be designing one moment, I could be running a workshop, I could be in a meeting, I could be analyzing test results. And then a lot of the time, you're just like, you need to jump between things. So being able to focus is a very important skill as a designer, because you wear a lot of different hats, and a lot of those require different parts of your brain. So when it comes to being focused, these are just a few tips on how I stay focused in my practice. When it comes to workshops, I like to give people breaks. I like to write down the goal on the board to make sure everyone remembers what we're focused on, and then working on solving one problem at a time. That helps to kind of keep people in line. And it's also making sure that you have the timer and you focus people there. And then working with clients, really you just need to get this like dangly cat thing, and then just throw it at them and they'll be fine. That's all the tips I have for keeping clients focused. And then for designing for yourself, these are some of my tips. Is I like to combine similar tasks together, either per hour or per day. I like to turn off notifications. Sometimes I change location or I take a walk. Blocking out time is also very handy, and also just saving all your emails for the end. There's a really great book called Make Time by Jake Knapp, who also did Design Sprint, where he helps you. There's a lot of great kind of recommendations on how to make time for things. So I definitely recommend that book if you haven't read it. And then tips on staying focused with your team. So that is making sure that everyone knows what the goal is and reiterating it often, like a lot, because it's really easy to get distracted. And then sync on tasks, do stand-ups, make sure everyone knows what they're working on. And then for meetings, this is a big one. Just set a meeting agenda. Everyone will be happy about it. You're not dilly-dallying over random things. So you allow everyone to kind of come to the meeting ready to discuss. Stay focused. So as a product designer, you have your hand in a lot of buckets. To be fully effective means you need to be able to switch your brain from one task to another seamlessly and often. Next, you're a good communicator. So this one is a heavy hitter and obviously is key to being a designer and key to being a UX person, or just key to, in general, just being a good professional. And I think when it comes to good communication, it actually falls into two kind of categories. I've kind of lumped it into like speaking and listening. So when we talk about communicating through speaking, as a designer, communication is our core function. So we communicate mostly, we specialize in communicating visually, but at the same time, we also need to work on verbally and written communication, because those are also things that help to support the work that we do visually. And then when it comes to listening, listening is all about active listening. So being present, asking the right questions, so that you can gain information you need to help understand your problem. So these are kind of some examples. Client says, I don't like this color. Old you is like, fine, I'll change it. The new you is like, well, I chose this color because it complements the rest of the page and focuses the user towards the CTA, which is the main goal of the page. So you are valid, like you can iterate or you can reiterate why you've done things a certain way. And the more you practice this, the better it'll be and the easier it'll be for you to validate your designs with your clients. And for the dev, we can't do this. Well, then the old you would have been like, ugh, there goes dev again, just be in dev. And then the new you is like, hey, I actually have feature X and I'm thinking about designing it this way. What are your thoughts on the solution? So it's kind of one, involving people sooner, asking them questions and then getting their opinions and being able to listen to what works and what doesn't work. So these are kind of like examples of communication and how you can pay attention to how you bring in your, how you communicate with others and how it affects the way people kind of treat you. So communication in terms of discovery, these are things that you kind of need to just be, to think about is you need to give clear instructions when you're workshopping, listening to your users and asking good questions. And some tips here would be to just do a dry run if you can. And then the other one would be, don't try to do everything yourself when it comes to workshops. Give people the time, separate your team into note takers and facilitators, because if you're trying to do all of that, then you're never going to be able to actively listen. The next one is working with clients. So this is presenting your work, educating on process, and taking feedback. And a good recommendation here is if you're in a meeting and you're presenting something and you're focused on your internal dialogue, then you're not focused on listening to what the client is trying to tell you. So record your meeting if there's no one to take notes, and then come back to it and pay attention to it after, because there's no need for you to have to try to, one, write down what the hell they're talking about, and two, also actively listen and be able to engage with them. So that's my recommendation. And then the other is assuming that the client doesn't, just assume that the client doesn't know what you're talking about when you do things. So break things down, explain, but also just be strategic about it, and don't like dumb it too down, because I'm sure they're not idiots and you don't want to treat them like idiots either. And practice. So just practice as much as possible. Communication in terms of designing, that is being able to communicate your design intent. It's also from a visual communication standard. It's standard is understanding the semiotics and the cultural connotations of what you're doing. So being aware of those theories, knowing design principles to enhance communication and intent, because when you're explaining your work, your clients and your team, they don't have the same theory that you have around colors or typography. So pull that theory, make use of your design university degree, and drop those words, you know. Then the other piece is just taking feedback. So that's coming in with the context that like people aren't out there to get you, but asking questions about where their criticism is coming from, understanding kind of where that's coming from and how you can then how you can approach it. And then communicating with your team members. This involves like sharing your work, asking for help, design reviews, team syncs, building connections. So when it comes to communication with your team, you want to try to be as honest as possible. That's my take on it. And also try to build relationships with them because they're human beings too. So the more you can kind of connect with people, the more people are willing to advocate for you later on. So I definitely recommend just talking about other things other than work sometimes. And then this one's an important one. The difference between a good designer and a great designer often comes down to their ability to communicate. So practicing your communication, that is key. The next one, you're assertive. We're gonna get there. This is feels like it's long, but we're getting there. Assertiveness. This one is sort of a leadership role and it doesn't always come easily, but it is important to a project if you want to be effective. So in a perfect world, this would be our general timeline of a project. Let's say you've got discovery, it's 6 months, we're going to produce it, it's going to be amazing. Yeah, and then in the real world, it's actually a little bit more like this, where things are going to come in from different sides. We don't know when it's going to change. But if you allow others to move the pendulum how they want, whenever they want, you'll end up never finishing. And that's where you need to learn to push back when it matters and to remind people of the goal. And then also to remind people, if people aren't listening, to remind people of the risks involved in throwing out different or new objectives, because that kind of changes the direction of things. So being assertive is important, and the reason, it's one of the reasons why, it's one of the reasons that helps to kind of be agile. You want to fail fast and you want to iterate. So being able to make a decision, even if it's a wrong one, is progress. And then when it comes to discovery, workshops are notorious for going off track. And this is where, as a facilitator, you just need to be able to own that role and bring people back when they need to come back. And there are a lot of other methods for facilitators to kind of manage that. A good one is also just kind of making sure that the timer works and that people are aware of it. And being assertive with clients, that one is something that you definitely kind of have to work on and you kind of build up for. But part of it is that I think where people kind of falter is that they're not confident in what they can do and why they've done it. So if you have a clear understanding of your design process, of your design decisions, and then why it matters to the outcome of the product, then you go in much more confident than if you were to go in being like, oh, I did this thing, but I don't know why I did it. And they're going to ask me, and I'm not going to know. But if you are aware of those things, then you'll be fine. Like, you know what you're doing. And obviously it doesn't come, you don't gain this overnight, and it takes practice. So yeah, work on it. And then designing. I like to say that it's best to keep design decision makers to a minimum, because when you design by committee, you end up with something like this, or you end up with a camel. So make sure that the design decision makers are at a minimum. And then also, one of my tips is, if you can't come to a design decision, go with a direction and propose an A/B test later. Let the users decide what is right or wrong. And then assertiveness within the team means that you're straddling a line between what's important to you and what is important to the goal. So check your ego, just make sure that potentially, if it matters to you or if it matters to the results, then know when to push forward with your opinions, or just know when to back down when it needs to. So that, you just gotta kind of figure that out. So for me, I don't apologize for making a decision. If I'm wrong, now we know. If I'm right, then I told you so. And yes, that rhymed, and I'm sorry. So I'm real humble. I just like to, let people know when I'm right. But yeah, so don't apologize. Making a decision is progress, even if it's wrong. Next. Ooh, this one's the last one. So this one is a great one. You're curious. Curiosity comes kind of in two forms. What you bring to your role, and then how you use it in your role. So what do I mean when I talk about curiosity? I'm talking about things that are part of who you are. So let's say, for example, I like to travel. And every time I travel, I come back more refreshed and I'm inspired by new experiences and the people. And because I work in a global company, that means that when I work with people all over the world, that potentially allows me to empathize and bridge the gap between my colleagues. So it's the things you do outside of it. Like if you can only work and you only do design and you only think about design, then you're working in a very narrow frame of mind. And part of being an experienced designer or being a product designer is that you are building experiences. And if you have a limited library to pull from, then that's not going to be very helpful to you. So get a like is pretty much what I'm saying. And then the other piece of curiosity is how do you use it in your job? So this is about asking questions, active listening, and then also to continue to learn new tools and processes. These are things that will help you to better define your goals, understand your users, and also collaborate better. So it's curiosity that motivates, curiosity towards what motivates your users, curiosity towards understanding how developers work, curiosity towards your client's business. These types of things will help you be a better designer. Curiosity comes down to asking the right questions, actively listening so you can better empathize with your users and design solutions that work for them. To recap, 10 soft skills for highly effective designers. So you are adaptable, problem-oriented, organized, collaborative, patient, empathetic, focused, communicative, assertive, and curious. So these are all ways, or these are all soft skills that help you be a better designer, and they help you create, participate in projects and bring a positive kind of attitude towards a project that help to make it succeed. And if you want to become a better designer, I think working on these soft skills will help you get there. And then, for example, this is my designer pyramid to supreme mastery. Very scientific. So if you know your hard skills, then potentially you're more of like a noob level. You know your Adobe Creative Suite, you know those things. But if you want to grow to more of a lead or senior designer role, then you're starting to feel a little more feely, empathetic. You're considerate of your team. And then if you want to be more of like a leadership person, design director, then you're thinking about leadership skills. Your team management, conflict resolution, those types of things. But if you really want to become like supreme master, then what you need to do is you need to add magic skills. So this is where, you need telekinesis and mind reading and time travel. So that one will be another talk that I'll do later. I'm still working on that. But yeah, this is how we get up the ladder of design career. And then I will just leave you with one final little nugget of my unsolicited advice, which is that projects come and go, technologies change, and there will always be better designers. So these are things that are out of your control. What you can control is the experience people have working with you. And if you, as a designer or experienced designer, don't consider how you work with people as something that you can manage, then you're missing out on opportunities to kind of progress your career. And I think soft skills really help in doing that. So yeah, that's it. I will open it up to questions if you guys have any. If not, then I'll just.
We have one question.
Sure.
What do you think is the best way to learn soft skills?
The best way to learn soft skills?
Yeah.
That's a good question. It's probably practice, really. It really depends on which one, I guess. But if we go back to, so if we're trying to work on these, it's just being conscious of the things that you want to work on and practicing it often with not only your colleagues, but with your partner, with your friends. Those types of things, you don't improve on them unless you actually kind of continue to use them. So I'd say be conscious of what you want to improve on, and then make conscious decisions of how you want to get there. So making like actual notes of, how am I going to be more adaptable? Well, anytime somebody says this, then I'm going to react like this versus this. So yeah, that's kind of how I would improve my soft skills.
And we have another one. Are these only suitable for designers?
Definitely not. I think these apply to anyone and everyone involved in any sort of kind of professional environment. Um, if you're a developer, you could probably use the same thing. If you're somebody, a project manager, you probably use the majority of these anyway. So it definitely is cross-discipline.
Great, we don't have no more questions, but a lot of great feedback in the chat.
Great. Thank you. If there isn't anything else, then I will end it here. Thank you, guys.